Hello everyone, I'm John Higginson, founder of Nature 2030. Before I start, I'd just like to say a couple of thank yous. Thank you to Stephen and Polly from Higginson Strategy, who have done so much at our end. Thank you to Colette and Sam at Ecologi, the workhorses behind this whole event, who have pulled together more than 170 speakers for this amazing two-day event, absolute heroes. Thank you to Elliot Coad, Ecologi's founder, having the vision to put this event together. I was meant to be at Glasgow, as I'm sure a lot of people were right now. But if I was there, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to spend the afternoon with my panel and have today people and all these people from around the globe. So great seeing those people in the chat there from Nairobi, Germany, all around the UK. So really looking forward to getting some questions from you guys for our event this afternoon. Fixing climate change, stopping air pollution and water pollution, reducing consumption, saving species from extinction, working out how we as humans can live on this planet without destroying it. These are not easy problems. The people who want an easy life work on Brexit or US elections. They don't work in the environmental space. So thank you all for being here, and thanks to my panelists as well. That's why I'm so proud to be joined by a panel of people who have been keeping the flame alive for decades. Liz Goodwin, OBE, is Senior Fellow at the Waste for the World Resources, Environment and Chair of London Waste and Recycling Board. Sorry, a bit of a mouthful, that one. She's champion for UN Sustainable Development Goal 12.3, which aims to halve global food loss and waste by 2030. Her role in London includes getting the British capital on the path to reaching a 65% recycling rate by 2030 and zero carbon by 2050. Sian Sutherland is co-founder of A Plastic Planet, one of the most recognized and respected organizations tackling the plastic crisis. Multi-award winner, including Female Marketer of the Year, Entrepreneur of the Year, and British Inventor of the Year. Sian is a serial entrepreneur with a varied background in advertising, skincare, Michelin-starred restaurants, film production, and branding. Welcome, Sian. And finally, Captain Paul Watson, is one of the founders of Greenpeace, founder of the Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. He's been awarded many honors for his dedication to the oceans and to the planet, including the Amazon Peace Prize, and is named as one of the top 20 environmental heroes of the 20th century by Time magazine. Welcome to all of you. Before I start, this is a live discussion. This is the first of the live discussions. So thank you for letting us have that. So do ask those questions. And what I'll do is I will pick those questions and aim them at panelists in the audience as time goes through. I've got two screens here. So if I make any mistakes there, moving across screens and stuff, do bear with me. But if I can start with a first question, and I'm going to put this to you, Liz, please. What effect has COVID had on the environment movement?
Well, I don't think it's had long-term effects, but I think it has certainly stopped a lot of things happening as fast as they should have done this year. We've certainly seen some areas of work which have just ground to a halt and not been able to do anything. Businesses have been focused on getting through the pandemic, so have governments, and so I think there has been very little progress in lots of ways during this course of this year. But I do think that there's still the commitment to go beyond, get out of the other side and to actually accelerate. We haven't seen people walking away from the commitments they've made. You know, a load of London boroughs have declared climate emergencies, and they're all sticking with that, and they want help to actually making that happen and become a reality. So I'm fairly optimistic, but you know, clearly this year has been a bit of a hiatus.
Same question to you, Sian. You know, what have has it been good or bad for the environment?
Well, I think I completely concur with Liz that it's been momentarily bad, but long term, I think, you know, that pendulum definitely swung the wrong way at the beginning of the pandemic, certainly the beginning of lockdown. I think everybody was in this state of fear and everybody reverted to using plastic to try and protect themselves. And that's from plastic packaging for every product in a supermarket, right the way through to obviously the huge mountain of plastic PPE that we see everywhere. There's little blue masks that litter our streets now and litter our oceans. So I think that we had this understandable knee-jerk reaction where we reverted back to using this dinosaur material, thinking it was the only thing that could protect us. Of course, not listening to the science. And the science tells us that actually the virus exists for longer on plastic than it does on most other materials. But the fossil fuel industry had an absolute field day, particularly in the US, where they spent over $200 million lobbying governments in order to get plastic bag bans lifted. Pretty much halfway through the lockdown in the US, you could do anything. You could pump anything out into the rivers, into the air in the US, in the name of getting industry back on its feet through the pandemic. So they must have thought Christmas came early, but I feel the tide is swinging very, very much the other way now. And it's up to all of us as organizations and individuals to get behind that pendulum and push it back as fast and furious as we can. Because one thing is for sure, I feel that we have never felt more connected to nature than we do right now, pre-pandemic. So that's a massive positive that has come out of it. I think we realize we can't have a healthy economy without healthy humans, and we can't have healthy humans without a healthy planet. And the meddling and the abuse, really, that we have given the planet, using it as our dumping ground, using it as a piggy bank of resource that we can plunder relentlessly and give nothing back but waste. I think we've recognized that this cannot continue. So I feel that there is going to be a massive 2021. We're going to see an uprising at every single level of much bigger commitments, and hopefully not just words. Hopefully we're actually going to see action happening as well now.
Great, thank you for that, Sian. So Sian talking there about how there's been a temporary stop, but we've been getting back in contact, back in touch with nature. And we've had that point echoed really from T. Jacks, who's from Watling Climate Action Group in South Oxfordshire, who said that actually some of us are seeing this, we should see this as a catalyst to get people thinking about what they can do to change their lives. Is that something you agree with there, Paul?
Well, yes. Well, for Sea Shepherd, it's been a problem because it's caused an escalation in poaching activities because poachers take advantage of these kinds of situations. But I think that looking at COVID, it's more of a harbinger of even worse things to come. We've seen emerging zoonotic transmission of viruses over the last 20, 25 years. And for the most part, it's been ignored. You know, Zika, Ebola, things like that. That didn't affect everybody. This one actually affects everybody. But with the escalating diminishment of ecosystems and the diminishment of species, we're going to see more zoonotic transmission of viruses. Plus, we have pathogens that are emerging that have been long dormant in melting permafrost. So the future is not going to look it doesn't look very good unless we address the real cause of this. We've got to stop destroying ecosystems. We've got to stop this diminishment of species. We are absolutely dependent upon interdependence of species for our survival. We need diversity, we need interdependence. And if we don't address that, we don't start looking at things from a biocentric point of view, then we're not going to survive. We don't continue to live with an anthropocentric mentality that it's all about us. We have to understand that if we don't learn to live in harmony with all other species, we're just not going to make it.
Great, thank you. So looking at some of the comments that are coming in now, there's one that's really an open goal for you, Sian. Lots of people, some of them working in the NHS, talking about PPE and all the plastic that's now been used in healthcare, as we've all, well, lots of people have reached out for plastic. They've felt fearful. And they've moved to plastic, thinking this is this wonderful, safe material that will safeguard us from coronavirus. But also it's just been in our life for so long that people have felt safe there. Someone's asking, is there any alternative to disposable PPE? So over to you, Sian.
Thanks, John. Well, I guess there's two different separate areas that we should look at here. And one is medical waste. And medical waste is it is incinerated on site. So much as, of course, burning a fossil fuel, we all know where that ends up. and where that has got us so far, but at least it's in some kind of captured system. So you've got the medical waste that the hospitals are generating, and I know, you know, the NHS, unbelievable volume of plastic waste created through there. And then you've got us, the people out there, the general public, now wearing our masks, now, you know, living in fear, thinking, should we be just depending on plastic as something to protect us? And I think just the mask alone is a very symbolic one for us. If everybody in the world used those blue polypropylene, you know, the plastic face masks, if everybody in the world decided to use one of those for a year, that would be 3,000 trillion plastic masks that would all end up in the environment at some stage. None of them are ever going to be recycled. You know, we all know the truth about recycling. Global recycling is going down, not up. It used to be at 9% globally. It's now at 7%. So the whole thing of medical waste, I think we need to separate from us as the rest of the planet, and what can we use? And we need to be thinking reuse. That's the only way. It's so much better. I heard a scientist had a brilliant thing on the radio saying just use a reusable mask and then pop it in with your undies and wash it as often as you wash your underwear. Because people were just asking daft questions like, how often should I wash my mask? It's just, I don't know what happens. We lose our common sense. And actually, things are very simple. You just protect yourself, use something reusable. We don't need these throwaway things. And a weird thing has happened with the human race. We are the only species that creates waste on the entire planet. And when you step back and think about that, you think, what right have we got to normalize this thing called waste? And I feel that the pandemic and this vast plastic iceberg that we have created through PPE has really woken us up to the fact that we use plastic as the default for everything. So much as there's a massive amount of PPE pollution, it is still a tiny fraction of the overall amount of plastic pollution that we cause every single day, because we use it as the default for everything. Plastic is a fossil fuel that we momentarily make into a bag, a box, or whatever, and then it will exist on the planet for centuries. So we mustn't use it for temporary things. It's really that simple.
Great. So reuse, do not recycle. And Christine Sylvester backing that up there, use the reusable ones, wash things. A really good question here from Hannah Scott, who is the Climate Change Officer of Thanet District Council. Really one for you, Liz, I think. She's asking, when local councils are facing cuts, what can they do to try to reach net zero? Any tips?
Well, I think a lot of the waste reduction initiatives actually save councils money. So, you know, even frankly, basic recycling saves councils money because they get income from those materials. But one of the really important ones is food waste. You know, if people are wasting less food, not only do the householders reduce their food bills because they're throwing less away, but the impact on the local authority is massive as well, because they don't have to pay to collect all this waste and then to dispose of it. So there are lots, you know, actually engaging with their communities is really important, because that is actually going to help manage the costs. One of the other things is, you know, there are an awful lot of local authorities in the country. If we had more collaboration and more sharing of best practice and sharing of knowledge and ideas, we'd actually get some economies of scale, and we wouldn't be reinventing the wheel every time somebody starts something. We don't all need to go through that learning curve. We can learn from each other.
Great. And Paul, you've been in this movement for an awful long time, and I think you made a point there about the fact that the poachers are out there on the sea. They're probably not respecting lockdown rules. Tell us firstly, what happens to your fleet? And for those that don't know, Sea Shepherd is a organisation that has a large boat or ship rather, that goes out there, puts itself in the way of harpoonists illegally hunting whales all around the ocean. It's a fantastic organisation with that brilliant logo that you've got behind you there, Paul, which I love, and so many of us that are in the movement have known and loved for so many years. Tell us, two questions really to you. What happens to you in terms of, are you able to go out there, or is 2020 a write-off for you? And secondly, what have you seen in terms of donations? Because I know a lot of charities have really struggled with donations, because the first thing that lots of people cut back on when they think they're going to lose their job or they have lost their job are those donations to charities. And what's happened to that?
Well, we're not protecting whales so much now because Japan has retreated from the Southern Ocean. So our efforts are now against illegal fishing. We have two ships off of West Africa right now. We've arrested a number of trawlers, illegal trawlers, over the last couple of months. And so we have 12 ships out in the sea. We're patrolling the Mediterranean, the Caribbean, the Eastern Tropical Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. And it's difficult because of the restrictions. Our vessel, the Ocean Warrior, was stuck in Singapore from March until just a couple of weeks ago. And now we're en route to Peru to try and head off the Chinese fleet and their operations there. What it does mean is that our crews have to go into quarantine for 2 weeks prior to joining the ship. And if any one of them proves positive, then we have to start all over again. So that's a challenge, but the ships are out there, and we have about 200 volunteers from about 25 different countries. In addition, we have anti-poaching patrols. Right now, we have a large anti-poaching force on the island of Mayotte between Madagascar and Mozambique, protecting sea turtles. And so it's been difficult, but it hasn't slowed down our struggles. And it hasn't affected our fundraising. In fact, our fundraising has increased. And I think the reason for that is that we can show our support base the results of our interventions, and people appreciate that.
Great. Question from the audience now. Lessine, I hope I pronounced that correctly, from Nairobi in Kenya. She's just 16 years old. She's asking the panel how to get young people more involved in discussions on things that they can do. Would anyone like to answer that one?
Well, I can answer that. Young people are involved. In fact, I'm really very excited by just how many young people are showing so much initiative and are taking leadership. Individuals like Greta Thunberg, for instance, on climate change, indigenous people, young people from indigenous nations who are getting involved, actively involved. And I've always said, it's not for us to tell young people what to do. It's for us to encourage their initiative, encourage their imagination, and let them lead.
Great.
Yeah, I totally agree, Paul. And we often get asked, "Oh, do you have an education scheme? So do you go into schools?" I said, why would you go into schools and talk to school kids who get it in a nanosecond? We're the problem. We're the ones that made this mess. We're the one that need the educating. I don't want to be the generation that made this mess and didn't at least try to do something to get us out of it. And I totally agree. I think so many young people are stepping up and they're getting involved, and all they need to do. So our message, I think, to your questioner is all they need to do is, what is the thing that makes them feel passionate? What is the thing that they feel they'd love to get engaged in, and just be active and participate? And just remember that it's just about stepping into something and finding your little community and then helping people. And then suddenly you will flourish in that space. You know that saying, if you're not an activist today, you're part of the problem. And I think we all probably in this group feel that it's not good enough anymore just to say, isn't it terrible? Look what's happening in the world. We've all got to step up and get involved.
I agree with what you've both said. But I talk quite a lot to young people in businesses, and quite a lot of them, they're going to be the leaders of the future, and they actually want to learn what went wrong and what are some of the pitfalls that they shouldn't be falling down. So I find there's a massive thirst for learning what mistakes there have been happening in the past, so that they don't go through those, they don't fall into those headlump traps themselves. But I think we've got to encourage them and nurture them, as you both say.
Great. And as Sean said, if you're not an activist, we've got all these activists I'm seeing in these comments here, and it's so great to see, and there's such an abundance of young people on here. If you're not an activist, you're part of the problem. Question from Anika to Liz. She's saying that her London council doesn't offer food waste collection. Shame on them. Name and shame them, please, Anika. Anyway, she says it's a big problem. She's written to them asking what their plans are to introduce it, but hasn't received a response. How can she bring about change in her area? Name them on here now. We will out them. Liz,
Yeah,
anyway,
well,
anything she can
they've
do?
all got to do it, and we're working hard to try to make sure that they do. Some of them are claiming that it's more expensive. If they've managed it with the changeover of their systems and they manage it effectively, it ought to save them money, and it's got massive benefits. So when the waste strategy comes in, it'll be a requirement to have separate food waste collections. So I think it will happen, but we need to keep pushing. And the more she can do, the more we will do as well to help her. But I think fundamentally, we've also got to be talking to householders about reducing the amount of food waste in the first place. Yes, okay, there will be some food waste that needs to be collected and disposed of, but we've got to stop wasting as much food. It is bonkers the amount of food that we waste. The average family with children in the UK still wastes £700 a year. Especially if we're in a recession, we need to stop doing things like that. And the pandemic was really interesting in terms of householder behaviour, because we were all sitting at home, had far more time. We started writing shopping lists when we went shopping, because we were only going shopping once a week. And I was talking to Dave Lewis, the then chief exec of Tesco, and he said the first couple of weeks after lockdown started were fascinating, because there were quite often men, but there were people in the shop who were doing the weekly shop for their household, and they'd got their shopping list and their list of things they needed to get, hadn't got a clue where to go around the shop. Give them a few weeks, they became expert, and they were trundling around and keeping their distance and shopping. But we had to learn all those, learn the benefits of planning, and as a result of all of that, household food waste in the UK definitely reduced. Sadly, as lockdown was eased, we saw household food waste levels starting to increase again. I desperately hope that some of those behaviours we learnt through lockdown will actually persist, but we've got to work at it.
Liz, am I right in thinking that at the end of 2022, so the beginning of 2023, we will have nationwide food waste collections in every borough?
That's part of the waste strategy, so that is the objective. Whether or not we actually manage to get there, yeah. But
is there a massive investment happening in building new anaerobic digesters and composting facilities to take all that waste?
There has been quite a lot. It's been a real learning curve, because there was quite a lot. You had to grow the collections at the same time as the capacity, and initially the collections were growing more slowly than the capacity. So there were some anaerobic digestion plants that were built that then ended up shutting, because they didn't have the feedstock reliably coming through. But I think it's going to be a bit of a learn as we go along. We are seeing the waste management companies investing more in anaerobic digestion. So I think there will be the capacity there. We've just got to get on and sort out the collection side of things.
Great. I'm going to just pull in a couple of comments that Chrissy Levitt makes. She's seen the Netflix documentary Cowspiracy. I don't know if you've seen that in the US, Paul. But really, if we pull the whole animal for food industry together in that, she's really asking, why don't NGOs speak more openly about the meat and agriculture industries? And let's pull fishing into that as well, because she's also made a point about fishing, Chinese fishing off the coast of West Africa. Maybe that's something you've been involved in trying to stop, and saying that's something worth investigating off Mauritania.
Well, yeah, we're actually co-producing a film called Seaspiracy by the same people who made Cowspiracy. Oh. And Sea Shepherd vessels, all Sea Shepherd vessels are vegan vessels and have been for decades. And because we believe that, well, the meat production industry is the single greatest contributor to dead zones in the ocean, the single greatest contributor to groundwater pollution, the single greatest contributor to greenhouse gases. And that's not even including the seafood industry. So also 40% of all of the fish that's caught in the ocean is being fed to domestic animals, pigs and chickens and domestic salmon. It's extremely wasteful, extremely polluting, and the world really has to adopt to a plant-based diet. just for our own survival. And what was the second part of that question again? About
it was pointing out something that they've seen in West Africa with Chinese fishing vessels apparently harvesting huge amounts of fish.
Sea Shepherd has official partnerships with Benin, Gambia, São Tomé, Cabo Verde, Namibia, Tanzania, and Gabon, and Liberia. And what we're doing there is patrolling their waters. We provide the resources, we provide the volunteers, and they provide the enforcement. And what we're seeing also now is because of the Asian and European fisheries that are looting and plundering the waters of Africa, we're seeing more impoverishment amongst fishermen in fishing communities in Africa, which is going to lead to piracy similar to Somalia. Just this last week, one of our vessels was attacked by pirates off of in Beninese waters, and I believe that Mauritania and Senegal are seeing an emergency of piracy also. And this is being caused because of the fact that these communities have been so impoverished by the real pirates. And the real pirates come from Spain, they come from China, they come from Russia. Those are the real pirates. They're the ones who are plundering the African resources. And but really, here's the problem. If we don't put an end to all commercial industrialized fishing soon, there will not be any fishing industry anywhere by 2048 because there won't be any fish. It's as simple as that. You know, we have to shut it down. For hundreds of years in Polynesia, they had a thing called kapu. And what the shamans would declare in a bay in Bora Bora, kapu, no fishing in this bay for 20 years. And if anybody was caught fishing, it was a death penalty. Why? Because they took it really seriously, because they knew that if the fish disappeared, they would die. And that's what's happening right now. There are no kapu areas anywhere in the world. There is no place for the fish to hide. There's no respite. We are wiping them out. And unless we put an end to that, the oceans are going to die. And as I say all the time, when the ocean dies, we all die. We don't live on this planet with a dead ocean. Since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations in the world's oceans, and phytoplankton provides 70% of the air we breathe. If phytoplankton disappears, so do we.
Wow, some really, really big things there. And I'd almost love to just ask you what that piracy looked like. Were those pirates that attacked your ship last week? Were they attacking with guns and stuff? Because presumably there is nothing of any real value on your ship anyway, because you haven't got any.
Oh, there is. There's true.
Right.
Kidnapping.
Wow. Okay.
In fact, just 2 days ago, in the same area, a vessel was boarded, and it was a Chinese vessel, and they were taken prisoner. They're being held for ransom. When they attacked us, fortunately, we had Beninese soldiers on board and a few shots in the air, and they backed off.
Wow. Fascinating, and just showing that kind of front line work that Sea Shepherd is doing there when people are putting their own lives at risk to save the fish in our ocean that our whole planet relies on. I'm going to go to a question from Stephen Kirk, who's put a few questions out there. I've got you there in the end, Stephen. He's a development and environmental student at UAE. His question, I think this one's coming to you, Sian. So, would a single-use plastic ban and carbon and plastic tax be a good path for governments to implement? And why hasn't it been done yet?
Love that question. Yes, it would be a great route to actually see some change happening at impact at scale and at speed, because I think that all the voluntary commitments that we're seeing right now, and I live in a world of dealing with business, trying to help them reduce their plastic footprint. And every single one of them has got a plastic pledge, pact, policy, promise, every single one of them. And every single one of them is going to fail on the voluntary commitments that they have set themselves. Every government is also going to fail on the commitments that they have made in the reduction of plastic and action against plastic right now. And the sad news that even if they did succeed, we would only be seeing a 7% reduction in ocean pollution by 2040. So a new report came out last month evaluating every single one of these voluntary commitments. And the reason that it's okay for them to fail is because they're voluntary. There is no consequence to them failing. There is no comeback. So the way we see it is very simply that, you have us, the shopping public, completely disempowered. We buy what we're sold. We have industry, and it's industry's job to sell us something different, something better for the planet and for us. But it's government's job to mandate that industry can do their work and make the change happen. And the only way that industry can change fast is if we have taxation and if we have new legislation. Because at the moment, they have a voluntary commitment because they have to go to their stakeholders, their shareholders, the pension schemes, and they have to explain to them that their profits might be slightly lower next year because they're paying it forward to ensure their business is still relevant and will still exist in 5 years' time. And if we have new laws that will impose things much faster, and if we have proper taxation like a carbon tax, then we're actually starting to price in the externalities of the resource that we take from the planet, which at the moment all the big businesses are taking for free. And once we've built in those externalities of cost and taken responsibility for the impact of them, then I think we will see a very different kind of balance sheet going forward. But this has to come from government. It will never come voluntarily from industry because it's just too hard.
Great. We've got a lot of questions. I'm going to pile them all together in kind of composting, and this is probably one for you, Liz. Some people talking about the fact that they compost food, others talking about how anaerobic digesters are the way forward, and industrial composting, because a lot of those compostable plastics can't just go on your compost heap at home. They won't break down. What do you think the solution is? What should individuals do if they've got a bin? Should they put it in that, or should they get their own home compost heap? And from a broader kind of larger perspective, what should we as a society be doing?
Well, I think for individuals, if you've got space to have a compost heap, then compost what you can. A lot of people don't have the space, unfortunately, especially if you live in a city or in a flat, or you have a very small area outside your house. So home composting is great because it means it doesn't get into the waste stream. But there are obviously some things you can't put into home composting, and that's where the separate food waste collection comes in, and the importance, as Sian said, of every household having access to a separate food waste collection. And then if we do that on a nationwide scale, then we can actually reap the benefits from that and start to make a more circular system, because anaerobic digestion will produce both energy and also the digestate, and the digestate can be returned back to the soil to provide the nutrients back to the soil. So we're starting to see a proper circular system. But that is all a bit end of pipe. I'll come back to my original argument. We've got to stop wasting as much food, because it's costing the economy, the global economy, about $1 trillion every year. It costs families a load of money. It accounts for 8% of greenhouse gas emissions. We are not going to achieve our climate change commitments unless we reduce the amount of food we waste.
Great. One question I've got, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, Paul, but well, we've seen a recent US election, and I think a lot of people in our audience were very pleased at the result. But also, he hasn't won the Senate. Now, I think a lot of people in the environment movement were hoping that Biden would come in and get a whole raft of environmental things through. What's your thoughts on this? Do you think he will be able to do something? Because certainly from over here in Europe, we've always been very keen to make sure that the US are on board on various things, from the Paris Agreement to anything else. What's your thoughts on the US come next year?
Well, the election really puts us back to where we were 5 years ago. Which means it'll be business as usual. There's only two parties. Well, there's really only one party in the United States. It's the Democrats and the Republicans. This third party, I mean, the party of the ignorant. But, and Biden might have control of the Senate. There is an election in Georgia, and the two senators, if the two Democrats win, then Kamala Harris will have the controlling vote. But Biden's pro-fracking, Biden's pro-fossil fuel industry, Biden's, not going to do anything really to address this. Yeah, yes, he'll join the Paris climate change thing, but as we all know, that's just talk, and there's not a lot of activism going on there. So I don't think it'll change things, but I'll tell you one thing, it's a hell of a lot better than what we've had for the last 4 years. But other than that, it's not really, I would call a revolution. I mean, by the very fact that the Biden administration is pretty much blocking out the progressive like Bernie Sanders and AOC and blocking them out. And it's going to be corporate Wall Street in control once again.
Great. We've only got 8 minutes left. I'm going to take another question from our clever Nigerian Leeson, who's asked a great question, which is, how are each of you leading by example on a personal level? Just tell us something we can do at home, because as Paul said, we can't rely on the politicians. They're not going to fix this for us. This is going to be us doing it. And what is it that we and all these people in the audience can do at a personal level? So, Sean, I haven't come to you for a while. I'm going to start with you. Anything great we can do?
Yikes. I have two viewpoints on this. And one is that I don't like this new social phenomena of the ethical consumer. I don't understand why we are given the responsibility to make up for the misbehavior, the bad behavior of the corporates. So this whole thing of we're the ones that have to fix it when we have no power, we simply buy what we are sold, I think we should never forget, and we should feel a little bit more irritated about. But we all have a responsibility in this. All of us have sleepwalked into the mess that we're in right now. We've all got to collaborate to get out of it. So for me, definitely, I think it's very easy to give up meat. And I think that's something that we should all just do. And let's just slow down on eating meat. There's so many different alternatives now. I think we have to be very careful about eating overly processed food to replace it, but just to slow down eating meat and have a plant, just as Paul was saying, we should have a plant-based diet, keep it super simple and super local so that we're not, also creating a whole load of carbon miles through our diet. And I think that we should really think twice about the kind of car that we drive. And that's all these changes are coming in. I don't know about you, but I feel this new future of renewables and electrical mobility. All of this is happening really fast now. So if you have a choice and you're about to sell a car or buy a car, upgrade a car, I would strongly recommend go electric.
Great. Go electric if you're a driver. That's a great bit of advice there from Sean. Liz, have you got any?
Well, I agree with everything that Sean said, but I mean, I am fairly obsessive about reducing food waste. We always have a shopping list. I've been doing it this afternoon for tomorrow's shopping. But I also try to make sure we use up leftovers. I use my freezer intelligently. So I write, I label things so I know what's in there, and I try to make sure it gets used. So, trying to manage the things that I talk about a lot, trying to make sure that I'm, doing my bit.
Paul?
Well, I think we need to believe that we can actually make a difference. And, I always say that the solution to an impossible problem is to find the impossible answer. I mean, the very idea in 1972 that Nelson Mandela would become president of South Africa was unthinkable and therefore impossible, yet it became possible. So we shouldn't be deterred by the overwhelming odds against us. And I think that if we concentrate on doing everything we can in the present, that will define what the future will be. So not to be worried about, the odds against us, not to be worried about winning or losing, not to be worried about the future, just concentrate on the present and doing the best you can. And, that I think is the way to go forward. And for young people especially, don't be deterred by criticism. You don't get anything without, provoking a lot of anger and anxiety. So our job as conservationists, rock the boat, make waves. We're not here for popularity contests. We're here to try and get the truth across and to ensure that we survive into the future.
Great, and I'll add my own. I am certainly riding a bike, and I'm going to give a plug to Ecologi, because since last year I have been, as well as being the founder of Nature 2030, I have my own communications agency, Higginson Strategy, with 12 employees, and I've offset the whole life of all those employees. So it's great to know that we planted 3,000 trees in Madagascar and all sorts of other projects with that. We have a few minutes left, and I'm going to end on a question going back to the title of this. Can I really quickly, because it is only a few minutes, tell me something positive that you see next year? Because the title of this discussion is, what has COVID done to the world? What's it done to the green movement? Can you point to something positive that you see happening in the future? Quick fire one, Sean.
For me, it would be the number of cities and now countries that are stepping forward and saying we are rebuilding our economy post-COVID based on the donut economic model, which is not about unsustainable forever growth, but on planet and society thriving together. And to have Amsterdam, Copenhagen, Costa Rica, now Ireland, a couple of weeks ago, the Premier standing up and saying, we're going to rebuild on the donut economic model, I think is hugely exciting. If anybody wants to know more about it, look at Kate Rayworth's TED Talk on donut economics, super simple, and it will make total sense to everyone.
Great, thank you. Liz?
I'm really astonished at the enthusiasm that has lasted throughout this whole pandemic. And I think once we come out the other side, just harnessing that enthusiasm, letting it go, because, there's a lot of people sitting there with pent up energy that they're desperately trying to do things and haven't been able to because of the pandemic and the restrictions. So let's get on with it. And I think that energy channeled in the right way will just make a massive difference.
And Paul, you've got one minute to answer that same question. Point to positive.
What's positive for us is that we're getting more and more partnerships. As an NGO, we're partnering with governments. We just signed agreements with Peru and with Colombia, and that it joins Mexico and the African nations that we're involved in. And I think that this collaboration between government and non-government organizations is a good way going forward, because we can provide something that they can't. And what we provide is the passion and the imagination and the courage accompanied with their authority, and that can make a difference.
Paul, Sian, Liz, thank you very, very much for an absolutely fascinating discussion. I'm John Higginson, founder of Nature 2030, and we're now going back to Kel and Basna in the studio. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.